That aid that like I can transfer to the kids that need me as to welcome on this snowy day. As we begin, critical for us to reflect, recognize, and consider what it means that Dalhousie University operates in the unceded territories of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, and Passamaquoddy peoples. These sovereign nations hold inherent rights as the original peoples of this land, and we each carry collective obligations under the Peace and Friendship Treaties. Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982 recognizes and reaffirms Aboriginal and treaty rights in Canada. Many of you are coming from other territories, both online and here in the room, throughout Turtle Island. We acknowledge all of the original peoples across this land. It is also particularly important during African History Month that we recognize African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for almost 400 years. These acknowledgements are particularly important given the topics we're going to talk about today and given the context of what's going on in the world around us right now. I want to welcome you all. In particular, it's exciting to see alumni from near and far, and our virtual audiences as well. It's wonderful that we have the opportunity to do this in a hybrid format this year. This is always one of my favorite annual events in our calendar here within the Faculty of Management. We are here because of and to honor Norman Horrocks. Here are the facts. The Dalhousie Horrocks National Leadership Fund and accompanying lecture was established in 2007 to honor Dr. Norman Horrocks, who has a list of initials after his name: OC, PhD, FCLIP. And you can tell by that his outstanding leadership in the field of librarianship in North America, Australia, and Europe. Over several decades, Dr. Horrocks, who was the former director of the School of Information Management, now the Department of Information Science, but he was also the Dean of the Faculty of Management. And he as well pursued a distinguished career, a very active involvement in professional associations in the United Kingdom, Cyprus, Australia, the United States, and Canada. When I began my time here at Dalhousie, which is way back in 2003, Dr. Horrocks was one of the, besides Dr. Richard McDonald, who is here, was one of the first people I met and really gave me the history of this program, of this faculty, and made me feel welcome. So beyond the facts, Dr. Horrocks was, in fact, the guardian of our ALA accredited degree, and he was a foundational part of the Faculty of Management. For those of us who were very privileged to know and work with Dr. Horrocks, he was the program. He was the part of the team that ensured we received our first ALA accreditation. He recruited many of the key faculty members at Dal. He was consistently the strongest advocate for our field and for the need to have this degree within Dalhousie and within the region. As we work with the next generation of leaders, very happy to see all our students here today, the qualities and skills that Norman, as we often call him, embodied remain central to this profession. Especially this year, in this time of much unrest, concern, it's important to think about how the skills that we bring to society can impact and advocate for change. Dr. Horrocks was truly a social networker, but also a bridge builder and a connector long before social media existed. He built community. He was famous for his Friday fireside chats. He was endlessly curious and loved engaging with students, faculty, and professionals. He remembered everyone's name, no clue how he did that, their interests and their passions. We are at a pivotal point at this time in society where the key values of our profession really can show us the way forward. We need these bridge builders instead of keeping people siloed more than ever. So the legacy of Dr. Horrocks is really to shine a light on the way forward, embracing a future for all. This fund, as I mentioned, supports a scholarship and a lecture. So today we get the great opportunity to celebrate both. We are very excited first to have our lecture, and then we will honor our award winner, and of course invite Sarah Horrocks, who's joined us here, and her daughter to speak about Norman. Following the trend of the past couple of years, we're excited to bring leaders from public librarianship to discuss how they are using story time to focus on diversity. We are even more thrilled that they are alumni of our programs. Danielle Hubbard has served as the CEO of the Okanagan Regional Library for the past 2 years, where her personal and professional philosophy is get things done and be as nice about it as possible. I think that's something that Norman would have, in fact, most definitely appreciated. Her background is in programming and outreach. She has worked at the Greater Victoria Public Library, Salt Spring Island Public Library, Point Moody Public Library, and Western Manitoba Regional Library, where she was the CEO and director. She holds our MLIS, yay, and spends as much time as possible hiking and writing poetry. Ashley Makeham is head of the youth services for the Okanagan Regional Library. She as well graduated from Dalhousie with her Master of Library and Information Studies in 2009. Originally from Ontario, Ashley settled in Kelowna, BC in 2010 and started working with ORL as a youth services librarian. When Ashley isn't talking about books for kids, she's cheering on her family at sporting events or sharing good food and wine with friends. So we are very excited to have this dynamic duo here to present today. So I will turn the floor over to you.
Monday, everyone. I've been told that there's a microphone secretly around here somewhere, so you can hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Sandra. It's really exciting to be here. As Sandra mentioned, Ashley and I both graduated from Dal over a decade now for each of us. So at the last class we talked to this afternoon, I said I graduated the year that Ashley graduated. So we're already getting our facts wrong, but I'll try and keep them straight in this presentation. So what we're going to do is first, I'm going to frame what this lecture is about. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what the Okanagan Regional Library is, because it's on the other side of the continent from here, so I don't presume that you know. Ashley will then tell you her first chunk of the story of Drag Storytime at the ORL. I'll tell what happened next in the second chapter, and we'll try to wrap it up with our takeaways, and we'll take questions at the end. So what our presentation is about is the Okanagan Regional Library's saga of Drag Storytime. And the reason I think that we were invited to come and present today is because it really was both an internal conflict at the ORL, and then when I took over as CEO, it was a major external conflict hosting these programs, the Drag Storytime programs at the ORL. We're not going to get deeply into like the philosophy or the morals of why you would or would not host a Drag Storytime in a library setting. Ashley will touch on that a little bit, but that's not the primary focus of the lecture. This is more like kind of a storytelling of what happened at the ORL with this program. And then also because this is a leadership lecture series, I should say, we're really going to focus on how we each made the decisions that we made through all these times, and really importantly, what values led the decisions that we made. Because I think, as you'll be able to tell as we go forward, this wasn't a really straightforward process. This wasn't something where a directive was handed down to Ashley and then handed down to me and we just checked off the boxes. This was really a story where we were each thrown into a complicated, divisive situation, and we were each drawing from what did we really believe was the right thing to do and the best thing to do under the circumstances we were given. So hopefully that wasn't too overly mysterious. I'm also going to apologize. I have a weird dry mouth today. I'm not actually nervous to talk to you, but I was sick over the weekend, so I seem to be like dry a lot. So sorry about that. So I started as CEO of the Okanagan Regional Library 2 years ago, a bit over 2 years ago. Has anyone here been to the Okanagan? So like a few of you. Before I got the job as CEO of the Okanagan Regional Library, I had not been there other than just to drive through it. So basically the ORL covers that whole landmass. It's the size of the country of Ireland is what we always say. It's the 16th largest public library system in Canada, and I believe the 5th largest in BC. So we have 30 branches. Each one of those little dots is one of our branches. We have 300 staff approximately. We have 2 unions. Ashley is the president of one of our unions. And the system is centered in Kelowna, so that's the biggest city in the Okanagan where that giant star is. But you'll see it goes all the way up to Golden, which is close to the Alberta border, and it goes all the way down to Soyuz, which is right by the US border. And actually, there's a couple reasons why I'm telling you that as a preamble. One is just I think it's really interesting, but also to show that it's a regional library system. So each of those dots approximately represents one municipality that pays into the ORL. So I, as CEO, report to a board of 24 elected officials. And some of those communities, generally the bigger, more urban centers, tend to be quite left-leaning and progressive, and the board members from those communities tend to be left-leaning and progressive. But then a lot of the smaller communities are quite conservative. So just to keep that in mind, that's where the system gets its funding from, and that's the upper level decision-making body for policies, for funding that I need to get approval for to make decisions. So, and that's going to come into play a little bit later. So I'm going to pass things over to Ashley. Ashley's going to tell you kind of the beginning of the Drag Storytime saga, and just keep in mind that the content Ashley's going to tell you about, at that time, I was the director of a library system in Manitoba. I had no idea any of this was happening. I'm not even sure I really knew the ORL existed. So that's... but soon it was going to be my problem too. So what Danielle is saying, she was not CEO for this part of the story. Okay, so what is a drag story time? Often people think of story times as libraries or in the library with a staff member coming up, presenting stories, having fun. That is basically drag story time, except you're inviting a special guest, a drag queen or a drag king, to celebrate a different part of your community. Drag story times were started by Michelle T. in San Francisco, and the idea was to create a more inclusive and affirming program for families in the queer community. And there's a really great website called dragstoryhour.org if you want more information on that. In more recent years, this program has become the center of controversy for libraries in particular. So they receive a lot of publicity, and they also have a lot of outcry and lots of people yelling on both sides about it. The threats made to libraries and library staff have resulted in some cancellations of drag story time. We did not cancel ours, so we'll keep going with the story. So when ORL hosted, this is what our program description said. Drag Storytime is a fun program that celebrates diversity and freedom of expression. DST helps children develop empathy, learn about gender diversity difference, and tap into their own creativity. Come dressed to impress, costumes encouraged. So that is how we marketed it, and that is how it started. It did go well.
it was well received. So how did it all start? Why did I make the choice to offer drag story time? So I had been in my role at ORL since 2010, so I'm not brand new anymore. I kind of got a good sense of what's happening out in our area. Lots of people in the community had been asking for it, or have you heard of drag story time? And I would say, yes, I totally have heard of it. It sounds really neat. And they'd say, you should do it. And I'm like, well, I don't actually know any drag performers in the Okanagan. Flash forward to summer reading club promotion. I'm out at the schools. An educational assistant approached me and asked the same questions. Have you heard of drag story time? Why don't you do it? I give my line, I don't know any performers. And this education assistant happened to be a drag performer. And their name was, as a drag performer, was Miss Frida Wales. And right away, a kind of a moment, a spark happened, because I thought, well, this is great because I know that they work with kids, they're able to hold the room, because not anybody can do story time. You have to have a certain spark and a certain understanding of how kids operate. So I saw an opportunity to start a really good partnership with Miss Frida Wales. So we started planning. And we planned 2 events for the fall of September 2019 at our downtown branch. And we started promoting them in the summer and during August. I went on vacation. Then I came back and I heard there was a little bit of something going on. So online, we had started to get some comments on social media posts. So right away, we shut down comments just to make sure that people they were aware, but not fighting online. So that was step 1. And then we started to get questions from our upper management. They're like, what are you doing? Because they were starting to hear. They were starting to get calls. They were starting to get emails. And so I think a whoopsie was that we didn't talk about it initially, but I honestly, every other children's program I have ever done, I have not asked permission. I have not sought approval for it. So I didn't really know that was a step I should have taken at the time. In hindsight, yeah, it would have been nice to give them a heads up. So we continued on. It wasn't like, yes, we were getting comments, but it wasn't that intense. So we hosted our first one on September 14th. We had 162 participants show up, 0 protesters. And the books we read, very controversial. Not quite a narwhal. We're going with ocean theme for Miss Frida Wales. And giraffes can't dance. Because we had a second drag performer, Valerie Rose, who said, oh, this is hilarious because I'm terrible at dancing. So I want to read that book. And it was great. And these stories are really about acceptance, maybe not fitting in quite right, but being okay with yourself. So those were our 2 stories. So pat ourselves on the back. We did it. Everything's awesome. We proved that this is a good program. Okay, 2 days later. Our CEO at the time, not Danielle. I think this was their first experience with controversy coming from outside, and they had their own personal beliefs as well that kind of got mixed in here. So they released the board package came out, which goes to our elected officials. And as a member of staff, I also like to go through the board package and know what's going to be spoken about, which is a good tip. In it, there was a memo seeking the board to pass a children's programming policy that would eliminate all programs that were potentially controversial and divisive. So that is the first line of it. A controversial and potentially very divisive storytime program has arisen within ORL. It was very inflammatory, like all throughout, and it was very long as well. Okay, so the problem with this, 1, it censored our program that we were doing right now, Drag Story Time, which is really what they were trying to get to, but they were making it a blanket statement. So number two is actually censoring all future children's programs, right? It's not just Drag Story Time. It had way bigger ramifications than just Drag Story Time. And three, it was censoring the professional judgment of our librarians who are in community, doing the work, and going with what they know the community is asking for or seeking and providing. So it was shutting us down. If you'll notice further on, I've included the line, there will be activist librarians within our staff either now or in the future. So the union didn't like that. No, we didn't like it at all. The whole thing was bad, but we took on
censorship.
That's it.
Yeah, maybe.
I skipped that one.
This room does not like.
Okay.
Try again.
Oh, okay. Oh. Okay. I know. Okay, so then I will just skip it. I'll give you a brief timeline if I can. Okay, so September 14th was our first Drag Story Time. September 16th was the day the memo was released, and the board was meeting on September 18th. And so our professional staff got leave from work, and we all showed up at the board meeting because we were ready and riled up, and we wore buttons that said activist librarian. So we showed up only to have the board refer the memo back to the policy committee. So no decision was made. The decision would be made at the next board meeting, which was in November. I think it was November 20th. We had planned 2 Drag Story Times, if you recall. And at the last line of the memo said, the November date of Drag Story Time can go ahead regardless of this policy passing or not, because it's already been marketed. So we knew we had one more chance to do Drag Story Time. And we also knew it was a moment to prove that this is a worthy program to be doing. However, with it being referred to the policy committee said that they would also accept feedback from now till their next meeting. So this is September. And there was 2 months basically between, or a month and a half, where we received emails and phone calls and people just walking into the branch ready to tell us what they thought, good or bad. So it was a very, oh wait, I'm already on that slide. It was a very challenging time for sure. They received over 500 pages of written correspondence from all over, not just local. We received stuff from all over Canada. Other library schools were writing in support. You can view all of these. They are online in our board package. As well as our union, we filed a step 2 grievance of harassment against our CEO for infringing on our professional rights. So that made for a really fun time between the staff and management as well. There was a clear division there right away. Okay, so these are some of our headlines that we had. There was reporters coming in all the time. It was a really rough time at work, I will say that. Like, I was trying to do my job, but I didn't know who was walking up to me next. I didn't know what was going to be on the other, end of the phone that day. Is it going to be somebody crying and telling me about an awesome impact that this has happened? Or is it going to be somebody who's yelling at me? So it was definitely a roller coaster. It was very, very stressful and hard. But we did our best to deal with it at our branch. We did not have support further up because even if some of the management team wanted to support us, their leader, their CEO, was at the top above them and they couldn't be seen to be insubordinate too. So it was kind of like sneaky support sometimes, just an email being like, hey, I hope you're doing okay. So it was really, really hard, but we did our best within our branch to work together on it. And I also wanted to say, when we were doing our drag story times, we wanted to make sure that we were hearing from the families and kids who were coming to them. So this is a picture of a big banner that we had out during all of our story time. So they could write whatever they wanted or leave a handprint and that kind of thing. And it was really positive to see that at the end of it, that like, this is why we're here, not all the stories and chats and stuff online. Okay, so then we had our second story time, and Miss Rita Wales and I had this dialed in. We had dress rehearsals, like the time I spent preparing for this story time beats any program that I have ever done in my life. And it was worth it, I will say that. We had, let's see, so this is November 16th. The board meeting is happening in like a few days to decide about whether they're going to clamp down on children's programming. We had 291 people in attendance. We had 2 protesters outside who didn't stay. And we had some library board members show up to see what it was all about. They learned and they were like, oh, they're singing, they're reading books. Our CEO did not attend. The books read were Little Pea and Spoon. So the other part of planning for these, because we knew we were going to have a lot of people, was you can't hold up a tiny book. So it's the logistics of making sure you have mics, making sure we had TV screens projecting the book, and making sure the kids were at the front and supporters at the back if you're tall, please. So a lot of coordination. We had to move furniture. I was in the library branch probably at 7 a.m. that day, starting to move stuff around and set stuff up. It took over the entire branch. Okay, so another success. But we don't know if we're going to ever be allowed to do this again, or if all of our programming is now going to be impacted. So November 20th, the library board met, and they made 3 recommendations. 1, library professionals know their communities and have the expertise to make the decision of what programs to offer in their library. Huzzah. Parents and caregivers have the right to decide what programs they want to attend at the library. So this isn't for everybody. We realize that. But there is a segment of our community that want this. But we also have all these other things going on that other families can attend as well. And number 3, which much to other management participants, the entire management team had to go to mandatory sensitivity training. So those were 3 really great outcomes of this part of the story. I will say it didn't stop there. So that was in November. So in 2020, things took a turn. COVID, virtually, I was presented from the British Columbia Library Association with my branch head, who was a really great support during that time. We were awarded the Champion of Intellectual Freedom Award, which we were very surprised and honored to receive. And we also did an interview for the Doc Project. So this is me in my closet with this weird microphone setup doing a recording. If you want to hear the full story, this is a really great way to hear it. But also thumbs up, but I hope I don't get fired was the last thing I said before I did it. So these were the library values that were of great impact for me while I was going through this first part of our story. So intellectual freedom, it goes far beyond the books on our shelves. Our professional librarians and staff really woke up and recommitted to protecting our library and all things that come with that, including our programming. So I think we were pretty quiet, and then we really did become activist librarians. So we'll take that title with pride. Our community engagement, like at times I questioned myself. I was like, oh my gosh, am I forcing this? Is this not something that people want? Like if they're this upset about it. But I knew, but I had that doubt, right? I knew, but I had the doubt. So our local community really showed up for it, as you can see by the numbers, which was impactful for me, but it's impactful for the branch. And it just shows how much, if you know your community, they will come for you and support you and help you. However, I will say, as part of community engagement here, I did read through the 500 pages of correspondence and took that feedback in, and I checked my own bias as well, because they're in those 500 pages on the pro and negative side of both of the argument. There was comments about who we should have in to do story time, not that. You should have this or this person. And some of them I was like, oh, no, never. Like, but then I thought, well, why not? Because all good ideas come when you're brushing your teeth, right? That's when I had it. I was like, but why not? Why can't I have a Sunday school teacher in to read Christmas stories that our community would also enjoy with a religious spin, right? Like, people don't do that. Oh, but we could. And I think our community would really like that too. So taking that all in, I created a new program, which includes Drag Story Time in an umbrella of community readers. And that's what it's called, is community readers. So it's a partnership with members in the community, and they volunteer at least 3 hours to work with the youth services staff to develop a story time that reflects their community or something that they would like to share. And it's all about building community. So I had scheduled it for the spring of 2020, and we had Miss Frida Wales coming back because we had to triple down on it. And then I also had a PhD student who was going to promote women in science. And I also had a Sunday school teacher who was going to come in and share stories. And then we were just going to keep running it and go from there. But COVID had other plans. This program is now used by youth services librarians. Leading from your level, a youth services librarian is pretty low in the organizational chart, but I found myself being the leader. Like, I was leading all branch meetings. I was informing management as much as I could. I was leading a union through a grievance process. It was a lot, but you can have a tremendous impact from wherever you are in your organization. You don't have to be at the top making the decisions. And often it's when you stand up for something at your level and you share it with your team, you can really get things done. So that is my part.
Chapter 2. Okay. So then I came on board at the ORL in 2022. It was in 2023 that we ran our next Drag Story Time. But I started on November 1st, 2022. I had moved from Manitoba. So again, I didn't know that this was the legacy I was inheriting. I thought this is an amazing career move. I want to live in the Okanagan. I think I can do good stuff for this library system. But I didn't know that Drag Story Time had happened. So I would say within my first week on the job, for one thing, it's an intimidating job to begin with. You're living in a new city, getting to know 300 staff. You can't possibly know 300 staff, 30 locations, all that jazz. But then within my first week, I probably had at least 10 people tell me all about what Ashley just told all of you, and from all different levels in the organization. And it was so apparent that like everyone was hurting because this had happened. So the leadership team was not trusted by staff. Staff were not trusting the leadership team. The leadership team that I inherited, none of them had been opposed to this program, but they had all had to go through this sensitivity training. And every one of them mentioned it to me, and they were all like, that was the most humiliating period of my life. Like, I couldn't be insubordinate, but so I had to go through this training. I had to sit through these board meetings. I had to see what our staff were taking on, but that was what I had to do to be in that role. And then certainly, so I as CEO meet quarterly with each of our unions. We have the Professional Employees Association and CUPE for most of our other staff. And especially with PEA, the relationship was not harmonious between leadership and PEA. Like, it wasn't unprofessional and awful, but you could just tell everyone was coming to the table being like, I do not really want to be talking with you, and I don't trust that you're going to have anyone's best interest in mind. So it was really like, it just was weighing down the whole organization. And when the announcement went out to the BC library world, so, an announcement went out to all the other library systems in BC saying Danielle Hubbard is the new CEO of Okanagan Regional Library. I had several other BC CEOs reach out to me and say, congratulations, I wouldn't touch that system. So I was like, wow, this just sounds fantastic. I'm really delighted with all of this. So anyway, the point is, it was immediately apparent that some healing had to happen, and all of that layered on top of the fact that we were just coming out of COVID. That was hard on everyone, and there had been a lot of turnover in key positions. So the branch head in Kelowna, who was supporting Ashley through her saga, he had left not all that long ago. Many people on the upper leadership team had left. So there was a real lack of continuity and ill feelings just all across the board. And I should also say when I started in November, and our board meets quarterly. So I hadn't met our board yet. I had been hired by a board back in September. Then there had been municipal election cycle in BC. And so the new board, I wasn't going to meet them until February. So I didn't really know the people that I was ultimately answerable to. I know there's 24 politicians from all these places, but I don't have they're not the people who passed the policies Ashley was talking about, and I don't know any of them. So that's what I was coming into at the tail end of 2022. And then I've been in my role for, I think, 2 weeks. And then my director of public services came to my office and said, the youth staff in Kelowna want to run Drag Storytime again. And I'm just going to be completely honest. My first thought was, oh God, oh no. Not because I didn't think it should happen, but because I was like, this program was so hard on the organization a few years ago. We need to do it right this time. And it's going to be scary to do it right because I'm new and I don't know everyone's personalities yet. I'm hearing from all different sides, all the different factors that were at play, but do I really completely understand it or don't I? And one of the points that I seriously considered was A, I do believe in this program's value, but B, we kind of have to run it. This can't be the second round of administration not supporting a program that staff want to run for whatever reason. If I were to say I don't want to run it, it would be because the timing is really not great, but that's not really the responsibility of frontline staff to care if the timing is good for the CEO or not. So my response was absolutely yes, of course we're going to run it. I have no concerns. Let's do it. So we decided the program would happen at the end of January 2023. So we had about 2 months of lead up. So one thing to keep in mind is that the program was still going to happen before there had been a single board meeting. Before I had met anyone on the board, I didn't even know who the board chair was going to be. I knew that the person who had previously been chair was leaving the board. Her term was over. So I really didn't know what that above me decision-making body would look like. So I tried to be as strategic and tactical as possible. So the first decision that the leadership team and I made was that we weren't going to start promoting the program right away. We often promote programs several months out, but we anticipated that this is probably going to be a firestorm, and this is probably going to be even more of a firestorm because of everything that happened in 2020. I was anticipating I think the media is going to want round 2 of controversy at the ORL. So, and another thing is that the ORL closes down completely over the Christmas break. So no staff work and all of our branches are closed for 2 weeks, which is a long-standing legacy policy that the ORL has. So I did not want to start promoting this program before a 2-week closure, because then people are going to get even more riled up if they're trying to contact us and they're not getting any response at all. So we didn't start promoting it at all until early January, which also gave us a bit of time to internally get really organized. Because what I had seen was that in Ashley's saga that she told, the division was internal. There were people externally who were upset that this program was happening or happy that it was happening. But as Ashley said, there were like 2 protesters. Whereas now in 2022, 2023, the landscape had changed. I know that other libraries have been caught in the crossfire with book challenges, with programs, with all these kinds of challenges. So it was really important to me that like we as an organization need to be on the same page about what we're doing. So in December, then I arranged a series of meetings with staff who would be involved. So by this point, Ashley was no longer working in the downtown Kelowna branch. She had moved up to being head of youth services, which was kind of lovely because she works out of the same building that I do now. But so I arranged a series of meetings that involved me, Ashley, because she had past perspective. We included the new branch head in Kelowna because all of this was going to be happening in her facility. We included the youth services librarian in Kelowna because she was going to be the one running this next round of programming. And then we also fortunately have a director of marketing communications. So we invited him to the meeting and we developed and so the main thing we did was that we said, all the communications about this have to be centralized. I don't want to have the situation where staff on the ground in Kelowna are taking mysterious phone calls that might be positive and might be negative and having people come in and criticize them. So instead, we set up a separate email called comments@orl.bc.ca. We directed all the phone calls to come to Michael, our poor marketing communications director. And he and I automated what the responses would be. So if someone emailed, they would get a response that said, thank you for your feedback, gave a if it's negative, they get this little blurb. If it's positive, they get this little blurb. He and I would skim through the messages. And if they were really, really negative, like we got some threats, then we would report them to the RCMP. So that happened a few times. And if they were really, really positive, then he or I might write back and say something personal. I don't think it was quite 500 pages, but it was well over 500 comments that we received. So it was not really possible to respond to each one and keep our sanity. And also, especially with people who were opposed to the program, it just seemed like not a good option for our mental health to respond to them all. And just, I'm sure none of this will surprise you, but examples of some of the hateful things we heard, our communications director and I especially, we got a lot of calls and emails saying that we would lose our jobs, that we were pedophiles, that we were groomers, that we should be ashamed of ourselves. I had some folks from Action from Canada came to ORL headquarters and personally handed me a notice of liability, which is not legally binding. It's kind of bogus, but you're like being handed this legal looking form while being filmed. It was not a really positive experience. Our marketing director is Polish, so a couple people phoned him and left messages in Polish because they could tell his last name was Polish. So it got very personal. And we also, one of the other things we did was we coordinated with other groups in Kelowna. So we informed Kelowna Pride that this event was going to be happening. They, of course, were supportive, so that was positive. But we also worked a lot with the RCMP. The RCMP covers Kelowna. And so we had several meetings in the build up to the event itself where we did everything from we had an evacuation plan. We had a plan for if people need to get arrested, what door will we take them out of? Where's a safe place of refuge for Frida Wales if it comes to that? It was serious business. And the corporal who we worked with, then I guess he had done this kind of work before. And so he also was in touch with Kelowna Pride and Action for Canada, these two groups that we knew would be on opposite sides of the spectrum. And so he communicated to them ahead of time saying I don't want there to be, any contact between you guys. You're welcome to be here. You're welcome to show your support one way or another, but that's it. And actually that was one of the messages that I delivered too. I was talking to the media a lot in the 3 or so weeks before Drag Story Time. I would say almost every day I was doing some kind of media interview. And it was really important to me to stay as neutral and unsensational as possible. So I would say a few, a little bit of like, this program supports diversity, but I wouldn't grandstand it, and I wouldn't like get on a high horse about pitching the value of the program. I would stick to a lot of the things Ashley said of like, it's up to parents if they want to come or not. And we offer a wide variety of programs, and it's up to you if you want to come to this one or not. We also made it clear to people like, the drag performers are not being paid. We had a lot of people say, this is where my taxpayers' money is going. And it was good that we were able to say, no, it isn't. It's a volunteer program. We offer a lot of programs. So then the day of, oh, sorry, it got cut off strangely. So then the day of the program arrived, and unlike the story times that Ashley was telling you about, at our story time in 2023, there were probably 50 or so protesters and over 100 counter protesters. So those are people in support, but at the same time, that's scary because that's like over 200 people who are riled up. And I don't know this for sure, but I truly believe that if the RCMP hadn't been there, I think there probably would have been physical violence because both sides, they had signs. Some of the signs were really aggressive on both sides of the equation. An extra RCMP detachment was called in, and so the RCMP were like between the two lines of protesters. We had said ahead of time, and we stuck to it on the day of, that people couldn't bring signs into the library. So even if you're coming in support, like keep all your signage outside. And I think it was Ashley who said, which I thought this was really insightful, that in 2020, this was a program she wanted to bring her kids to, and it was exciting. And in 2023, she didn't want to bring her kids to it because we could just tell by all the, the buildup it was really building up. So this was me on the day of. So the point there is I didn't even see a single moment of the program. I spent the entire time talking to media outlets who were there. So Drag Queen Storytime sparks protest outside Kelowna, BC Library. Rainbow flags, motorcycle clubs, and unicorns. And Kelowna Drag Storytime. I think the next slide shows the unicorn. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's in there somewhere. In here somewhere. Battle brewing over Drag Queen Storytime. Drag Storytime returns to BC Library more than 3 years after controversy. And some of the media calls I had been getting into the lead up to, there would be reporters who would say, we hear your predecessor was fired over this program. Are you afraid you will also lose your job? No, my predecessor wasn't fired over this. Like, it was just like, the media was just like, give it to us. Let's make this dirty. And so then that second picture is the fellow who then became our board chair. So he was our Kelowna rep, and he's a member of the queer community. So he was he was on the one hand very supportive because he's a very confident speaker and he joined me in a lot of our media interviews. But I will also say, a week or two before Go Day, he called me and said, don't let the media talk to me anymore. I'm burned out over this. I'm not like, you guys take it from here. And after running these drag story times, and he was our chair, then he said, it's up to you. I support you and your staff doing drag story time, but like, I don't want to put my career on the line talking to the media over it. Which was fair. I think like he was the only openly queer member of council, and he was taking a lot of flack for it. But he was really supportive, and he stood up and did an opening address at Drag Story Time. So here it is. It's all going down. There's Frida Wales. There's Sandra, our wonderful youth services librarian, doing the same role that Ashley had. I think on the later slide we have the numbers, but it was like extremely packed.
350 inside.
350.
And the book read was Bird Hugs. And Rainbow Stew was the other story they did on a phone board.
How many people come to a regular story time in Kelowna?
Like 50.
Yeah.
So this was a lot. And so then this is what it looked like outside. Yeah, there's the dancing unicorn. And And so you can see, like, there's the library. And so the majority of people were in support of the program. We didn't actually take a picture of the protesters. I didn't think you guys really wanted to see those signs, but they were supposed to be on the other side of the road. But I think everyone would have encroached if there hadn't been our CNP there. And there were just all sorts of fun, crazy factors, like the Rainbow Perlator Pride truck was going around honking its horn. And then, like, library staff who weren't working that day were, like, driving past with pride flags. And it was like, it was quite the day.
It was chaos.
It was chaos. So, but we got through it. And you know what? As soon as it was done, I was really, really glad that we did it. There was at no point during this saga did I wish we weren't doing it. I wish the timing had been a little bit different, because the other thing that happened in the lead up was that all of our board members, all 24 of them, received packages of information from Action for Canada. So we did not include a picture of that either, but there was like a diagram showing, like, this is the pedophilia cycle, and this is, it was really bad. And so I got to email all of our board members and say, you'll be receiving this package of information. Please do not respond. Like, if anyone reaches out to you and wants a comment or wants to interview you, please direct them to me instead. Please. Which I think everyone did. I don't think any of our board members actually got caught in this back and forth, but it was awkward. So we're going to do a wrap up after this, but I wanted to highlight what values led my decisions through this process of running this program and how we ran it. So the first one was political neutrality, which is kind of similar to intellectual freedom, but not quite the same. So public libraries, as you probably know, we're publicly funded, like, we're taxpayers fund us. So in the ORL service area, that's really politically split who those taxpayers are. And so it was really important to me that, although, yeah, we're kind of not being completely neutral because we are supporting Drag Storytime, we're being as neutral as we can within the umbrella of supporting this Storytime. Like, we support this Storytime, but I don't want to alienate and ostracize the folks who are a bit uncomfortable with it. We want them to still feel like this is their library and they can come here. So that's why we tried to be as, just take the high ground, be respectful about the negative feedback. Organizational healing was a huge part for me. So I said when I came into my role, I could tell that people at all levels were, like, struggling with the aftermath of Drag Storytime in 2020. So that had been a really internally divisive situation, everything Ashley was talking about. And when I came on and we did Drag Storytime in 2023, the conflict was external. Like, actually, the organization was all on the same page. I know that we have some individual staff who, you know, for religious reasons or personal reasons, I'm sure we're not thrilled with this program, but I even had conversations with several of those staff who were in support of what we were doing. They were saying, I'm really glad I don't need to speak about this. That's fine. We should have programs for everyone. And I'm glad that you and the leadership team are speaking to it so that we don't have to speak to it. So I think that organizationally, it was really beneficial to just do, like, let's just do a restart. Let's do a restart. This is how it should be to do a controversial program. And also all the stress that I felt about the board, it all turned out well, because then when I met the board for the first time in February, it felt like I already knew them all because I'd already corresponded with them over this controversial issue. And I had several board members tell me, like, we trust you, Danielle. You got the URL through all of that. So, okay, what's next? And then staff empowerment was also really important to me because, as Ashley was saying, my predecessor had included that memo, that proposition to the board about activist librarians and not running controversial programs. And so I felt that it was very important for me as a new leader to show, like, look, you guys are, you know, that's your portfolio. You decide what frontline programming we offer, and I'll stand behind you on it. And I think that that's a really important piece of being a leader is like you have to wear the mantle of the organization. So even if some of that is stressful or hard or involves some personal attacks, like you have to take that for the sake of the organization. Do you want to speak to this one first?
Sure. Thanks. All right, so those were the numbers. We don't actually count people outside, but those are our best guesses. And we have done it since. So we have done one last year. It was in a different location, one of our other branches, Vernon. It's a little smaller than Kelowna, and it went really well. It did not by far have the same amount of protest and opposition as Kelowna. I think Kelowna has that inherited controversy, which makes it really good news media, or not good news, but it's newsworthy, or they try and stir it up. And would I do this again? Dun, dun, dun. Would I have done the 2019 one again? Yes, it was super hard at the time, but ultimately I was doing my job. And that is what I went into it with. Like, I didn't actually know that it would become a big thing. And I just, once I was in it, I was like, this is it. Like, we're going to keep moving ahead and doing it. 2023 was certainly a different climate, and going forward, I think, yes, we can continue to offer drag story time. However, the amount of resources, staff time, management's time, like a coordination with outside partnerships with the RCMP, it really takes planning and time to get through it. So with the proper resources, absolutely, we would do it again. But we are being led by our frontline staff. Danielle and I, even as a head of youth services, aren't going to be the ones dictating that your branch that has never told us you want to do drag story time are the ones that are doing it next, and you have to. That's never going to be the choice. It's going to be the staff coming to us, and we will be there to support them. But I will say, is this the only program that we can do to support the queer community? Absolutely not. And is this the program for everybody in the queer community? Again, absolutely not. There are many programs that we do throughout our region that are quieter, represent different beliefs within the community, bring different groups together, and they feel safe as well. These are programs that are big and attractive and get lots of news, and some people, that's their idea of a program for the queer community. But there are many who want a more reserved gathering space that they can come and be themselves and share space. So yes, and more and different.
Yeah, I would say really similar things what Ashley said of, would we do it again? Yes, I would do it again, but I would do it again if staff at a location brought it forward and said they wanted to do this program. This is not a program I would ever dictate to staff. And I would say in the aftermath of Drag Story Time in 2023, if you remember that map I showed you at the beginning, I had leaders from some of our little communities tell me, I'll do that program if you tell me to, Danielle, but just so you know, we will get vandalized. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to make you do that. Like, the goal of a program like this is to be inclusive and make people feel safe, but I don't want to put my staff in physical danger. And I think in a small conservative community, that could be the case. And I'm not ever going to make that call for staff. And I also think one of the really positive things that happened as a result of the 2023 Drag Storytime and onwards is, I would say, a lot of the relationships within the ORL are so much better than they used to be. Yeah. Like, I would say that at this point, leadership does have a good relationship with our unions. We're working on, I think we're there, we're getting there, rebuilding trust with our, branch leadership staff. And so I think at this point, if one of our branches said, we want to do drag story time, I would say, yes, and let's work together to figure out when we'll do it and how we'll do it. I wouldn't do what I did in 2023 of say, yes, you pick a date and we're going for it. Like, I would make sure that the rest of the leadership team and I had the capacity to take it on, because honestly, in the weeks leading up to it, that was like more than 50% of my work time was put into supporting this one program. which is not to say that it's not worth doing. It's just, there's a lot of things that happen at an organization that only the CEO can do. And if the CEO is doing that, that's a lot of other pieces that aren't happening. So I would definitely do it again, but with those kinds of caveats, I suppose. And so then we thought we would end on a more positive slide. That a good story is a good story no matter what you wear when you're reading it. And this came from one of the comments that Ashley received with the first Drag Story Time. It was a really positive anecdote that one of our patrons wrote in about. And so I think it does reflect that this was a really valuable program for many people, and also honors the fact that we kind of delivered this lecture as a story time. So I think I'm going to pass it over to whoever's facilitating the questions.
We're doing a dual question. I'm trying to honor both our online and physical audience. So first of all, thank you. So much we can reflect on here, and once again, I love that we bring this to our students, because this comes across as yet again the things you don't necessarily learn in library school, that you learn from living.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for bringing this. So I will. Are there online questions at the moment? Okay, I will open it then to our face-to-face audiences. Questions, thoughts, comments.
This should be a quick question, but you showed the numbers with each of the programs that you did and how many people attended and what have you. How does that compare to other programming that you would have done within your library?
Yeah, so a regular story time probably has about 50 people total. That would be parents with kids or caregivers with kids. Some summer reading club programs, like if we have a magician in, sometimes, and we don't run registration, you can get 200 for those. But these were by far our biggest story times that we've ever done.
As students of the MI program graduating out and going into the working world, and who are likely going to be experiencing similar situations or could be experiencing situations like that, how would do you have any advice for like advocating for yourself as a worker, advocating for your programming, anything like that?
Do you mean specifically around controversial programs, or?
The controversial programs are just programs in general that you want to do.
Yeah, okay. I think certainly for youth programs, one of the things I think is like, not everyone who works in public libraries has ever been a children's or youth services librarian, or ever will be, or would ever want to be. So I think if you're working in youth services, sometimes there's a advocacy piece that just happens being a youth services librarian to bring like attention to those programs to everyone else's attention, if you know what I mean. Like it might not be what everyone thinks they want to put their energy into. And I think, like, I would say that most libraries are open to running all sorts of creative youth programs. And then I would say the hard part is with topics like drag story time, it is a really fraught landscape right now. And so I know even within BC, which in general is a more progressive, left-leaning province than other provinces, there are fellow library directors in BC that I've talked with who have planned to run a drag story time and then have ended up canceling it because of like too many threats, like real physical threats. So I know that's not directly answering your question, but I think there's kind of that line between like, ideally, what do you want to do? And then like practically and safety wise, what's the right thing to do? So I don't know if that really gets at what your question was or not, but those are my thoughts just throwing at you. Yeah.
Other questions?
I do have an online question. So Nicole's asking, what did you do to take care of your mental health when you were dealing with angry people and misinformation?
Good question. Do you want to, like, what about in your, first time
In my land, I will say when I went back through emails to prepare for this and kind of remind myself of timelines, as well as looking back through the comments for the doc project, because they had us read some of the comments out for that. It was upsetting to me to go back to it. I had kind of tucked it away and it was really hard. Like, it was a very stressful time. My husband is here today. He lived it with me, and was very supportive. And, you know, going home was kind of a, this happened. And we used our staff together. We would share the good things together every morning. We would kind of gather together and be like, okay, here's a really great comment that came in. And, you know, throughout the day, there'd be some check-in points. But I definitely didn't know. I went through a lot of Tums. Like, I just had like a perpetual upset stomach for a while. So I'm not sure I protected it that well. But sharing it and not being the only person, I think, was really helpful. And the second time around, I know the staff in 2023 really appreciated that there was this streamlined method for protecting staff from especially online comments and phone calls. We can't stop people from coming into the branch and asking us, but there was a rote response, like, oh, if you'd like to send something in, you can email or you can contact these people. We were specifically told, like, you don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to engage. You can hang up on somebody. Our staff needed to hear that, because when you're in service, you're kind of thinking, I'm not allowed to hang up on somebody. So people would stay on the phone and listen to a long explanation of why we shouldn't do this and lots of negative things. And Danielle explicitly said, you do not need to listen. You have my permission to hang up. And that made a big difference.
I think, yeah, in the build up to 2023, I mean, to be honest, it's not good on your mental health to be like at the helm of running a program like this. Like, I feel like I didn't sleep all that great and had a lot of stomach aches. I run and bike a lot, which is why I have my fresh air water bottle. Rebranding. I did that a lot. I think in a lot of ways, 2023 wasn't as bad though, because at least the whole organization like was kind of on the same page. So at least I could go into work and I could about it to the leadership team. Like, I could stress about it to people who knew what I was going through. So I found that helpful. But I think for me, the most helpful thing was just to remind myself, like I was saying this to Allison's class earlier this afternoon, is like, you just have to try as best you possibly can to not take it personally. Like, even though people are saying personal things to you using your name and stuff they found out about you online, like, you just have to remember, like, the only reason they're doing this is because of the position I hold in this organization at this time. It's not really about me. So I think that was probably my best kind of shield, was like just trying to distance myself from how personal some people were trying to make it.
Richard?
Thank you to both of you for an engaging presentation. I'd be interested if you could comment, and maybe it's you, Ashley, because you were the one that pointed out that said, well, why shouldn't we have other types of programming? And I'd be interested to know whether that perspective has led to people coming forward with things you hadn't thought about before. Oh, sure, why not? Let's have a Sunday school teacher or whoever be part of this program. What happened when you sort of opened that opportunity for people?
Well, a lot of people who maybe were coming at it, well, like, I'm going to fight with you if you say no to me, right? And then I said, well, actually, we have a community readers program. Would you like to apply? And then I wouldn't get any emails. So it was a really good defense mechanism, but it did bring forward some really great presentation, story time ideas. We had Earth Day celebration focused, like environmental spins. It really is endless what you could do. I just thought it was great it was a great way to bring community together after having fought so much in the community about one program. It was like, well, if everybody wants to do it, we can do it together. And having it with a staff person. So we were making sure it was going to be a good program, that the person could hold a storybook or we can facilitate that, but like making sure you can present a story time in a lovely way that does build community. So we did work on writing an agreement up to make sure we got the best. And really, I think it was good, and it did help with some of the naysayers.
Great, thank you.
Drew, I'm watching my time here.
Yes, thank you. I think I can speak for a lot of people to say that this is a really bright point of seeing activism in a library not get shut down. I don't know how much you know about the history of Halifax and the recent history of librarianship in Halifax. This is activism in Halifax libraries is a thing right now. So being able to see this done in a place that did not have that outcome is really, really lovely. On the topic of communities and seeing things across countries, I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about not the stories that you mentioned of people who reached out to you and were able to potentially learn from you and weren't able to go off with drag story time, but can you talk about how you have seen the community that is librarians and Canadian librarianship come together to use what you guys have done to spread this activism in other places?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. Yeah, because one thing I want to say is I think if the library is planning to host a program like this and they either decide to go ahead with it or decide to pull it, that really has to be the decision of that library in that community, for sure. Because I think, like Nelson's a small town in BC. They were going to do a drag story time not too long after our 2023 one. And they had to pull it because they were receiving physical bomb threats, which is bonkers to me because Nelson is a really it's like a hippie enclave in BC. So sometimes it's just like, you don't know what's going to happen. But I would say following 2023, then I, and even more so our marketing communications director, have been in touch with tons of other libraries in BC. So he actually built a communication template that he's been sharing with any other library that asks. So it's kind of and he'll talk people through it. This is how you set up your responses. Feel free to use our exact wording or something really similar to it. And this is how you can set up your algorithm so it will filter out if it looks like there's a threat. So you don't even need to read all the negative ones. And so that has been really helpful, I think. And I think other library directors or other library staff and other systems have found it really helpful just even to talk to him or sometimes talk to me or Ashley. But I think he's kind of become the drag storytime whisperer in BC, for better or worse. But yeah, and I think the other part of it is it is a bit easier in a bigger library system where the people who take the flack can be a little bit removed. I think it's tougher, the situation you were in 2020, where if you're in a little library, you can't say phone this number and someone in a different building will take your yelling. You have to just take it. So I definitely sympathize with smaller systems. I think they have a tougher equation. But yeah, you can easily find my contact information on the ORL website. If you just go to orl.bc.ca and there's a comment field where you can reach out to me. And I'm happy to either talk with people here or pass you on to someone else in the organization that might be better at answering. But yeah, I would certainly say in the aftermath of all of this, me and several other people on our team have had a lot of conversation with other libraries that are trying to do similar things.
Do we have time for Kim? You just one more? Okay, one more question. Okay. Stacy, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, thank you again for your story. I just want to pick up on a part of the first sort of wave of your story around sort of solidarity and collective action through unions, and how maybe unions or associations or other kinds of collectives sort of figure into your story, and that you were able to use that as a particular tool for advocacy?
So for the union, at the time, I was not the president. But I was a union member. And I think it was our union president at the time who mentioned the board package, have a read through it. So I read through it and I saw the policy, and I just started with one email, and that was to my fellow youth services librarians. We don't even work in the same building. We don't even work in the same town. One's in Vernon, one's in Salmon Arm, and one's in Kelowna. So it started there. And then one of them was like, we need to go bigger. We need to get Rhiannon, and that's our labor relations officer, involved. And that was the first step. And then, you know what was good? I realized I'm not by myself. I've got other people with me now. And again, that expanded our little window or a little group within the branch to our librarians who are in the other branches as well. So that brought more people in to share it and to help fight on another level, that while I'm in the branch handling day-to-day, the deluge, this little part can also take on the policy and deal with that part of it and advocate with it. And we did get really lovely letters from around Canada and different organizations and collectives who showed their support. And that was just uplifting and kind of gave you a little more like oomph in those days when you were quite down or having been yelled at and just cowering in the back for a minute. But it really shares the experience, but also the ideas and what we can do together. So I think it was really powerful when the group did come together. We are a small group, so the professional librarians, like at our most, are like 30 members in our professional librarian union. And then the other bulk of our union is CUPE. So they're like 280 or so, if I can do any math,
Like that.
something like that. But they also joined in support of us, which was really great to see. But it definitely, the memo was so targeted at librarians that it was definitely a battle for our particular unions.
I think for me, I just wanted to add, like when I came in as CEO, the ORL was the first place I had worked that had 2 unions. So I think between having 2 unions and 30 locations, there's like just so much possibility for friction within the, like factionalism within the organization. So for me, a big part of my goal in planning for the 2023 Drag Storytime was to try to make it not be factional, like to really be like, you know, whatever position you're in, like we as an organization are doing this thing and this is our organization's response. So I think that, and I don't mean that at all to deflate either of the unions, but it's just like we all work for this same organization. We all need to have the same message, and we can all have each other's backs.
Yeah.
So I think that was, I would say it was really helpful, like just as a demonstration of that. Like I'm the CEO and Ashley's the president of PEA, and we went to OLA together and we flew out here together. And I think we have a very good working relationship now. And I think part of it is like getting through a couple situations that are really divisive, but making them like the organization is on the same page. So this isn't easy, but like we're all on the same page about how we're dealing with it.
That's a big contrast between the 2019 and the 2023 is that it was way more like the information that was coming down to everybody in the organization, no matter where you work, no matter what level you were at, everybody was getting the same information. And that was really powerful. And I think just, again, united everybody. Definitely in 2023, it was not a union issue. We were there to support, but more as ORL employees, where in 2019, it was a union issue. So there was
Did it encourage you to become president of the union?
nobody wants to be president. I think it contributed to it because people are like, hey, you did such a great job. hey, you can talk in front of people, and you did bring us all together, and we have seen you in action, and we appreciate the battle that you've already put forward. So keep doing it. It is worth it.
I'm already picturing an activist librarianship course. There we go. We can do it virtually too. Excellent. Well, thank you very, very much. Another round. Thank you. Wonderful. Excellent. And I would like now to turn things over to Sarah Horrocks to say a few words and to introduce our student who is the scholarship winner this year.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks, everybody, for coming this year, and thanks to the presenters for their great story time. Really appreciated it. Having attended several story times with several of my kids over the years, I certainly appreciate a good youth book. Anyway, I'm so thrilled to be here again this year. I'm so happy that this lecture continues in my father's name. He was a big part of this school. As Sandra said, getting the accreditation way back when. I, as a child, practically grew up in the Killam Library, going to work with Dad on a Sunday morning. I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a big favor to my mom to get us out of the house. But we thought it was a treat to go to the Killam and play in the stacks. And this year's award winner, Carolyn, I've read her bio, and a lot of what she's doing in the space of working with archival groups and re-ratifying the archival student body here at Dal is a huge thing that my father would have been so into. She would have gotten so many newspaper clippings about archives and the great work that they do. So congratulations to Carolyn, and thanks again, everybody, for being here.
I think Carolyn's going to come.
Is she coming? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
She is currently working on her thesis out west, but we will bring her.
Hi, everybody.
Yay!
I don't know if they can see me or not, but can you hear me?
Just give us 1 second now.
Okay.
There we go. Greetings, Carolyn, and welcome.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you for this award. It is really an honor to be the recipient of this leadership fund, and a big thank you to my professors and also a lot of other students who helped through the process of bringing back the Student Association. And just, we have a really great group of students this year that are continuously being leaders. And so I'm very honored to be picked out among many of us. So thank you. Sorry I'm not there in person. And I hope you all enjoyed the lecture as much as I did.
Thank you, Carolyn. Well, thank you to everyone for being here. For those who are here with us physically, we do invite you to a reception. Unfortunately, to those in the virtual audience, you will not be able to attend, but please go have some delicious snacks and drinks on your own. I would like to, of course, remind us all to continue donating to the Horrocks Scholarships, because it allows us to bring this great lecture, and of course to support our students, which is so important. And I wanted to thank everyone, especially our guests, for being part of this event. A special thanks to Kim Humes and Shelley Lamore for their organization, logistics, and overseeing this event. And please also stay tuned to our websites. This is our sort of big annual event, but we will be having upcoming lectures. Actually, for those of you in the room, when I say pay attention to our website, you may recognize that our website is not in prime form right now, but we are working on it. So if you have any questions, you can also reach out to myself or to Philippe Mangeant, who is currently the chair of the Department of Information Science. And we're happy to connect you to our events. Thank you to everyone once again, and let's go enjoy some snacks.